Good morning, May 11th. Today we're going to cover extracting data out of MySQL in tabular form as a CSV file and pulling it up into um, Excel and using it to create a pivot table, which is a way to group and summarize data. If you've never worked with those, they're magic. And then we'll pop back into SQL and finish up with functions and calculations and a new clause where you do kind of like what the pivot table does, which is called a group by clause, where you can consolidate um, data. So we'll get through all of that. And then with the time left, you guys can work on a few sample problems. So that's what I got on tap for today. So I will share my entire screen because who knows what I'm going to do. So I might as well share it all. Let's see. There's attendance. Bring up SQL Workbench. And I've been, oh, don't give it away. Was working on your problem since early this morning. Okay. So I wanted to show you guys the process for doing a query, which is kind of what the most analysts would use SQL for, is pulling data to use it for something else. Although you can very much write a report, you can answer, what's the most of this and what's the average of that. You can answer questions about your data, certainly using SQL. But that's kind of what we've already been doing somewhat when we query a list and when we sort it. You can go to the top or the bottom and look at the min or the max, and we've talked about functions where you can average things and whatnot. So I'm going to start with actually, I've got it on my hard drive. I did a query in Workbench. This is one of the big advantages of working in something like Workbench. Um, there's just a lot of tools that that W3 Schools site is great because everybody has access to it. But if you've got Oracle SQL Designer or Damon, what's the name of the Microsoft SQL Manager?
Yeah, my SQL Studio Management.
SQL Studio Management, yeah. And I assume that looks a lot like Workbench. Damon, have you pulled it up and messed with it yet?
Not too much, but I think it does look a lot like Workbench.
Yeah.
I haven't got to go in there too much.
Okay. Pretty much every database has something like Workbench, so you'll get familiar if you're in SQL at all. You'll get familiar with it. So something I did yesterday was write a query, just a real simple one, but I saved it as a file, save script. When you close out these tabs in SQL Workbench, it will often ask you, do you want to save this query as a SQL file? So I wanted to go to File and Open SQL Script. And yeah, Northwind orders data. And you'll see this is using the Northwind, not Northwoods, not our little college database, but it's using the Microsoft sample database Northwind. So I'm opening that up. Okay. So I wanted to select just some basic tabular data, like the company, the employee that's handling the orders for that employer, and the order date. There's not a whole lot of columns to work with in this little sample database, not as much as there is. I'm sorry, in the W3 Schools database, there's not a whole lot to work with at all. So there's a little bit more here. So I pulled up that query. So I'm just pulling the company name, customers.company is basically the company name, employee's last name, the orders from the order table, and the order date from the orders table. So here's my three tables I'm pulling from. and I wanted to join customers to the orders that they're placing and the employees to the orders that they are working. So that's what um, those two lines in the where clause join our tables. And I hit Control Enter, and I get like Sensini here um, has 4 active orders, 2 from company F, 1 from company D, 1 from company C. So you've got this repeating kind of tabular data, right? Where Freehofer is named however many times. He's got 2 from everybody, I think, and Jasani just has a couple of orders, and it's only for company F. And then we've got the order ID, and you see that is unique. Because of the way I constructed my query. So then what I wanted to do was export that as a CSV, comma, separated values file. So I click on this floppy disk, and it says export record set to external file. And you'll see that functionality in every SQL-based development environment like Workbench. So I clicked on that, and basically all you do is tell it what kind of file, and then name the file. And I wanted to save it as a CSV, which I already did, Northwind Orders Data. So I'll cancel out of that. So that's getting this table of results out onto the hard drive where you can work with it in Excel. So since it's a CSV, it came up automatically. No, actually it didn't. I had to bring up Excel and open that CSV, and it kind of converted it for me. But CSV is a very common format for Excel. So here is that data, that comma separated values brought into Excel. I need to get, if you don't have SQL Workbench, this is going to be lost on you. So let me see what I can do here. I can share a file. Can I not? Like in the chat, or? Let me stop screen sharing here. I want you guys to pull this up in Excel. How do I share a file in
You
Zoom?
might be able to copy the file like from its folder and then just paste it in the chat.
Well, let's try that, Damon. Here's the Northwind Orders data that I just opened. So copy that and put it into...
Yeah, the chat. That's how it works with Skype. That's what we do for work sometimes.
File. There it is. Your computer. It's next to there's a file button. You see that next to, or I'm not sharing screen anymore. Network disconnect. Click to retry. Let me close Excel. See what we got here. Sent successfully. Everybody seeing that okay? Called on and you hear crickets.
Got it.
I'm not able to open it yet.
Ah, that was Erica. All I saw was the last half of that. I don't have a voice at the moment. Okay, can somebody confirm that they see that file?
I can see it, but I haven't been able to open it yet.
It just said network disconnect again. No, it says click to open in my screen, in my chat, from me to everyone.
I don't see it just yet.
Well, I tell you what, there is more than one way to skin the proverbial cat. Home. I'm going to the classroom and doing what I probably should have done anyway. Add a file. Create file. Choose file. Where's data? Okay, in the classroom. I'm moving it up a little bit as we speak. Under worksheet fundamentals, about 6 down in the classroom, you see Northwind orders data.csv. Under the data analysis with Excel module. Here, I'll start sharing my screen again. If you go to the classroom, under data analysis with Excel, down under worksheet fundamentals, you should see Northwind orders data.csv. If you download that, you can either open it by opening Excel and saying file, open all files, and open that, or most Windows computers go ahead and equate it with Excel. Okay, so I'll give you another 15, 20 seconds on that, but I want to.
Don, I'm sorry. This is Chas.
Yes,
Could
Chas.
you say what file that is again?
Inside the classroom, under data analysis with Excel.
Gotcha.
Go down, 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 and look for Northwind orders data.csv.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure thing. And then we pull up, I'll go ahead and execute Excel without double clicking on that file. So now I've got Excel up and I want to open, it defaults to workbooks. But if you're in that file, it'll pull up Northwind, or in that folder, it'll pull up this Northwinds. So I want to save it as a workbook so I can start messing with it. And I'm going to rename it just to keep things clear. So I'm renaming that CSV file, or saving it as a workbook, and then calling it Northwind orders data pivot. Okay. So once you get that pulled up and it's you're working with this CSV data as a workbook. Now you can do everything in it that you would think with Excel. And you notice we do have a header row up here. We have company, last name, ID, and order date, and those default to the column names if you didn't modify it at all in your, if you didn't give it an alias in your SQL prompt or your SQL statement, then it defaults to the column name. So that's a chance to kind of format the output of your of your CSV file, or the content of your CSV file if you want to. But anyway, what I wanted to show you was a very, very simple pivot table with using this data that we pulled out of MySQL Workbench. So if I click anywhere in the sheet here, and then click Insert Pivot Table, I'm not gonna use the training wheels, which is the recommended pivot table, which is pretty cool when you first get going. I use those training wheels a lot, but for this one, so when you say insert pivot table, you get this this pivot table fields working area. And what a pivot table does is turn that long list of tabular data that with the repeating things like repeating company name and repeating salesman and whatnot, it takes tabular data like that and summarizes it and does all kinds of magical things with that data in a way that you can start to kind of sort of make sense of it. So the main thing we want to do is summarize the order ID and kind of make sense of who is working with what company and how many orders they're working. Right. That was the reason for pulling the data that I pulled. Was I was looking at employee and company and all the orders that those employees are working for those companies. So the first thing you want to create is in this lower right corner where it says values. That is where you tell it what you're looking at. So what we want to know is the number of orders. So I hope that makes sense. It will as we go along here, because I've got another file from your textbook that we'll be using here in a minute. So I want to drag, you click in the way you populate these fields down here, filters, columns, rows, and values, is you just drag the field up here down into that quadrant. So I'm going to take values, and it thinks it defaults to the sum of the ID, which they're generally speaking, there's two things you do in this value field. You can add up the values. If it's something like number of units sold and you want to know the total number of units sold, you would sum that. But if you just want to know how many order IDs that each employee is using, then you would change this and to count. You want it to count the IDs, because the ID could be 10095. You don't want to add the order IDs as if they are quantities or something meaningful like that. What you want to do is drop that down and change value field settings. A lot of magic happens in this value field settings. Thomas, can you nod your head yes or no if you can see my screen okay? You see okay? All right. So we click on value field settings, and that is where you change what you're doing inside the guts of inside the display of the pivot table. So you can do the sum of a value. We want count because we just want to know the number of orders. But you could also look at min, max, average, and other calculated fields, other stuff. Like I said, there's a whole hundreds of pages on everything you can do in a pivot table. So we want to change that to count, and you'll see we have 48 orders we're working with. And let's go back to our sheet because I created this pivot table in a new sheet. By default, it wants to stick your pivot table in a new sheet. So it creates this sheet 1 to the left of your data. But let's go back to the data real quick here and just confirm what the pivot table is telling us. So we should have our last piece of data in row, we got headers, so what, 49, right? And there we go, so 49. So that tells us that our pivot table is counting the number of unique ID or number of IDs we have, the number of rows basically that we have. So what I'm really looking for here is kind of a matrix that shows which employee, salesman, is working with which company, and and how many, that count of ID, how many orders they're working with each company. So I will pull last name down here to rows. And what that means is you'll see it pop in here in just a sec. I'm going to have a row for every employee. And now I have automatically, I have a count of the orders that they are working. So this makes it real easy for me to see that Freehafer is our most busy salesperson, and Zaire and Jasani have only 2 orders in the database. So, but we have another interesting number up here, right? Or another interesting column. And you can have multiple, and I'll show you that here probably after the break. You can have more than one row, and let's pull column or company down to columns. And now you'll see that we have for all the different unique companies, and there are about 20 of them, you have a column that shows inside of this matrix for each employee how many orders are active for that company. And then there's the pivot table automatically, and you can turn these off, but it automatically puts in a grand total column for you. So we know that company A only has 2 orders, and we know that Freehofer is working those. But then as you go across, you start to see what we saw before we broke it out by company. You start to see that where was that company, or where was the salesman that had, and if you slide it to the right, you start to see Freehofer there with 12. So you see your grand total for the row out there. I don't think I can get it all. Yeah, I got it all on one screen pretty much. I just maximized my screen. So you'll get a grand total for this row. So Sensini, 1, 2, 3, 4, sure enough, Sensini has 4 orders that they're working out of the orders table. And there's your appropriate math there. And then you get your grand total, which is, the sum of these column subtotals over here. And that is a basic pivot table, kind of an example of how you would go from SQL, grab interesting columns that you want to mess with, and then stick them into Excel and start to do stuff with it. You can do all of this in SQL, but if you're comfortable with Excel, which I am not, if you're comfortable with Excel, it has all that charting and all that kind of stuff. In fact, we can click inside the pivot table anywhere, and this won't be very cool. It'll be better in the next file we use. But insert a pivot chart, and we start to see like that one's not too interesting. Let's do a stacked column chart. Yeah, that's a little more interesting. If we insert that, it will stick it on the same sheet by default. Boom, there it goes. So now you have your pivot chart on the same worksheet as you have your pivot table. And just coincidentally, everybody's either working one or two orders, and the vast majority is 2 orders, which makes the chart look a little funky. But assuming your data were more interesting than a bunch of 2s, your stacked chart here shows the same thing that we saw, right? Freehofer is top salesperson, and she has 12. I don't know if she's a she or he. Freehofer has 12 sales, and you see the same thing over here: 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2, and then you've got it color coded by the company. So this pivot table and pivot chart starts to make magic of a pretty simple SQL query before your very eyes. So, any questions or commentary? This is super simple. I've got another one I want to show you that's a file out of your textbook. Or is this super simple? Does everybody already work with these all the time? Does anybody not work with these very often?
I don't.
I
David?
haven't in the past.
Okay, so Thomas, you're not a pivot table wizard.
Definitely not.
Okay, cool. Because this next exercise, and then if it's something that your company wants you to know about, and you feel like you're running to play catch up with all the cool nerds that know how to do pivot tables, there's a step by step, like chapter 29 and 30, and then there's some other information for pivot charting. It's really useful. So I'll walk you through it and give you the light bulb moments that I had. But then it's just like anything else. It's practice, practice, practice. Whether that's YouTube videos, or I've got access to Pluralsight and LinkedIn Learning that I pay for my own benefit. Pivot tables are way cool. Now you can do this, and that's why I wanted to show you the pivot table now, because later today we're gonna kind of do this in SQL. So you can decide if you want to consolidate and group your data in your query, or if you want to let it be tabular and let it repeat like I did, and so that you can then do your summaries and whatnot in Excel. Because if you do too much magic in SQL, you won't have the raw data to do it in Excel necessarily. So you kind of got to decide which way you want to do it. Okay, so for the next file, everybody's got Excel up, right? I'm going to close that. You should have, based on previous lessons with Excel, you should have inside of all the files that you downloaded from our SQL Bible, you should have yeah, we'll keep going. You should have one called, I think it's called bank accounts. Let's open. I believe it's on my OneDrive in my documents in ACDS data analysis apprenticeship, March to August. We're not going to go all the way to August. Don't panic. But when I named it, I wasn't sure. Nope, not SQL. Go back up. We're in data analysis with Excel. And there we go. Complete workbook. Complete book worksheet is the default zipped up. Bank accounts. I wanted to open that. Bank accounts. And this is the file that the book uses in chapter 29, along with others. It's a date. It's a dump of when certain types of bank accounts were opened for a bank with, I think there's 3 locations. It tells you the date that it was opened, and it's pretty much all in April 2019. They've gone ahead and calculated the day of the week, the amount of money that was put into each account. The account type is either an IRA, a CD, a checking, or a savings account. And you can see that this has actually been converted to a table. When you bring up a raw worksheet, you can say insert, not pivot table, but insert, I want to say table. There we go. Which is, this one is, it already is a table. But if you say insert table, you get these cool drop downs where you can start to see the unique values. See, we have existing and new customers, and it brings up the sort and filter and all that cool stuff automatically when you turn a worksheet into table format. So that's a cool Excel thing if you've never seen that. And working with a table versus a raw worksheet, there's some other functionality that's kind of cool. But again, that's whole nother chapter of the book. And then we've got, Central, North County, and West Side branch locations. And these are opened by is not an individual employee. It's the work section. It's either opened by like your customer service representative sitting at the desk over there, or it's opened by a teller. And the only reason I know that's my wife used to work at credit unions. Like I said, account type. There's 4 account types. There is a one line for each opening, so these amounts are all different. I'm curious if I drop that down. Yeah, see all these crazy different amounts? That's kind of how you can tell it's not a categorical variable. It's actually, something meaningful. And then the day of the week, which we have, sure enough, Monday through Saturday. I remember wife having to work Saturdays. And then the date of opening. Okay, so this is something that we can use to do a pivot table. And I want to say that they've already gone ahead and done some stuff under here. Yeah, so these are little pivot tables that they've already done for you. But I'm gonna just kind of walk through my own grand pivot table here and see if I can't totally confuse you. 914. If you guys want to goof around with this while we're on break, I clicked inside of our data worksheet down here, and I'm going to say insert pivot. I've already got the insert menu. I'm going to insert pivot table and start dorking with it on a new worksheet. And you'll notice, since we have nice clean data, no blank rows, no crazy headers or whatever, and it's already in a table format. It just knows what to do. So we're going to stick that pivot table in a new worksheet. And when we come back from break, we'll start dragging things into the values and columns, and we'll talk about all that sort of stuff. Okay, so see you back here at 9:30 cell phone time. And let me pause recording. All right, for anybody watching this recording, the last hour is going to be a blank. I went over pivot tables, just generally speaking, but I think I forgot to hit resume record during the whole last hour. So yeah, chapter 29 in the Excel 2019 Bible. And if you have any questions or concerns about pivot tables, just shoot me an email. We can get together one-on-one, and if the book confuses you, but otherwise it walks you through exactly what pivot tables are and what they do and why they are magic. And I also showed how to export data from SQL Workbench to a comma separated values CSV file, and then pull it into Excel and work with it. So if any of that is interesting to you and you want to see it again, just shoot me an email and we'll get together one-on-one. Gladly. Anyway, the mechanics of being a zoomographer. Okay, so let's get back to the show. Okay. All the tabs. Okay, back to PowerPoint. All right, so this is simple math. I'm gonna quit belaboring this. In Oracle, you could look at sysdate minus 30 would give you the date 30 days ago, literally sysdate minus sign 30. But in MySQL, we use one of those many functions that we talked about. So here we have date diff. It'll give the difference in days between two dates. So we have the student date of birth from our student file, and then we have sysdate. So this is how many days old a student is. So we highlight that and throw it in Workbench. And I don't think I have any quotes to amend. So it gives, 13,000 days old, So like I said, if you're doing something like, I think it's Erica and Lindsay, where you're looking at dates or number of hours, anything like that, since a write-up or a vulnerability was discovered or anything like that, there are lots of date functions. In fact, to do date math and date calculations. In fact, functions, MySQL functions in our W3 schools. And if we go down here, we go through string, which works on text, numeric, which does all kinds of stuff on numbers, and then look at all these date functions. And they don't, you just need to go through each one. If you're doing stuff with dates in SQL, you just look at all of the date functions in the database of your choice, the database of your organization. because they do different things, and they're not always super intuitively named. So it's kind of hard um, to necessarily pick them. But look, we got, I don't know, 40, 50 different functions that all do different things with dates. Some of them will compare. Some of them will return, like the day of the day name. I think is one. It returns the day of the week. You could type in your birth date, and it would return the day of the week on which you were born. Those sorts of things. So yeah, we've got date diff here, which gives us the difference in days. Now you could divide all that by what, 365 to get years, how many years old they are. That should work, right? There you go. 35.7 years. That sounds about right for where they were born. All right. So there's a little bit of date math and math right there.
Now, say you wanted to account for like leap years or something like that. Is there an alphabetical reference you can use?
There may be a function that is like years difference or a different. There may be a function that is not in days, like date diff returns days. So let's go look. Is there a years? No, that just truncates all the junk. Time diff? No, that's time. If it actually, well, that does account for leap years, Thomas. Date diff, I'm pretty sure, in over the last 35 years, it goes through and it's the number of days. Some years have that leap day in it, and some don't. I'm pretty sure it maintains that table.
Okay.
But I'd have to go into it, but I'm pretty sure it accounts for leap years. You certainly don't want to. I mean, you could. There's a formula, for it. If it ends in a 0 but not a 4, or every 4 years except for 1,000 years, or some nonsense like that. But I think it goes ahead and accommodates that. Okay, so that's math, and then we have these functions. Almost everything that you do, or outside of literally arithmetic operations, are going to be in a function. And they're in two different groups, which kind of makes sense once you get used to them. So in this session, we'll start talking about built-in functions. Single row functions are called, a single row function is, it returns that for each row of the data. So like you could select the first 3 characters, I think we've done. You could select the first 3 characters of everybody's last name, say, and that type of function happens for every row. So some examples. Yeah, there you go. I thought I had this one out there. So the day name will go out to the database and find the day of the week. And of course, it goofed up my quotes. So that tells you that Miller was born on a Sunday. And the format is year, month, day, right? So 1964 April 8th. I'm just seeing if I can. I'm scatting here. I'm going without a script. Ha! I was born on a Wednesday. So I passed day name a date in the right format. YYYY dash MM dash DD. And it returns the day of the week. So that's how you can find out what day of the week you were born on if you don't already know. So that's a single row function. Since I didn't pass it or use a table or anything, it's only returning just my birth date. But you saw how I did it when we selected all the students and found out the day of the week they were born on. I made this up. How do you spell each faculty name backwards? So there's a string single row function called reverse. And we execute that and we get Dreknalb instead of Blanchard. So there's these are examples of single row functions where it modifies this, but it'll come out for every row, as opposed to something like average or min or max that will take a bunch of results and give you one answer, a solitary answer, which is what we will do next. Group functions are the opposite. Single row functions manipulate in a return. They don't manipulate them in the database, but in a query result, it manages records. But sometimes we want to do like a group or an aggregate function. So for example, we might wish to display the total number of students who register for a particular course. Let's see if I got through that. I did not. I don't know why I don't have that in the can. But I think I'll get there. Yeah, just and that's where we would do a count function. The count of something is the number of things, just like in Excel. That's the reason I did the unrecorded pivot table session, was so that you would see the difference between the sum of something and the count of something. You can select the count of something in SQL. I don't know if we've covered that before or not. So group functions perform operations on a group of queried rows and return a single result. Single row functions return multiple rows, and group functions return a single result. So yeah, it gets a little confusing. But we can group data together and filter it, kind of like a pivot table does, which is what we're going to get into here in a minute. But let's see here. Some group functions are like average. So you have a bunch of capacities in location, right? There's, but we can get just the average capacity. So we can get, an idea of how large our average classes are. Whoop. So let's see what we got there. Select average capacity from location. And we get one return, right? One value. That makes sense. And count. Is just like when we were working with it in that pivot table in Excel. You are counting the number of occurrences of something. What am I doing? Oh, it does not like a space, as we learned when Andra was on the screen. It does not like a space between the function and the parenthesis. So count of star is means count of everything. So it's every column, right? When you select star from a table. So it doesn't really matter what you're counting, generally speaking. You can select the count of anything, and it's going to be the same. So let's look at that. So there's 20 of enrollment, but what are some columns in the enrollment table? Enrollment table, columns, grade. Well, now that's
John?
different. That's different. Go ahead.
Mine errored out for that one.
When you did select star, count a star from enrollment.
Mm-hmm. It
Uh,
says Northwoods enrollment doesn't exist. Are we in Northwind?
we are in Northwoods.
Northwoods. See, it says it enrollment doesn't exist.
You sure you typed it? I cut and paste them from the PowerPoint to avoid typos because I'm a fat fingered guy. You want to share your screen and see what we got, and we'll troubleshoot it? I think that's useful.
I feel like I keep wasting time with that, but sure.
I don't think it's a waste of time. I think troubleshooting errors is.
I spelled that
Yeah,
right.
you've got an extra E in enrollment.
Well, that would help. Okay, sorry.
Count of 20. There you go. Let's see. Now, this is, you see how we get 20 when we say count of everything, right? Because there's 20 rows in enrollment. But when we select something like count of grade, if it's null, it won't count it because it's not in there to count, right? Because it's null. So that's something to make sure you're aware of. Oop. Stupid space. See, there's only 12 rows in there where a grade has been assigned for that course. That's why count of grade and count of star are different. So in my day, I use I use count of star pretty much all the time. I don't remember worrying about nulls and not nulls and whatnot, but it's useful. So that's how the count function works. Yeah. Count a star gives an integer for all rows of a table, unless you have a where clause. You know, it's the number of rows that your query would return. But if you use the column name in there, it won't return for nulls. Just keep that in mind. Now, I worked on. Let's see this one. Yeah, here's a good example. If you say count a star, and we're looking for Ruben Sanchez's student ID number 5. If we say count a star, we get the number of courses he's enrolled in. But if we say count of grade, you won't get a return. It won't count the one where he has not received a grade. So let's punch one of those in. So Ruben's been enrolled in 5 courses, but if I substitute grade for the star, yeah, he's got 2 ungraded courses. So that's pretty straightforward. Just reinforces what we were talking about. And here are some more group functions. Max, min, sum. Remember, sum adds them together. Count looks at the number of occurrences. So you just got to keep those 2 clear in your mind. Okay, I want to keep going here. Let's do a query that gives group information concerning enrollment in course sections, including the sum, average enrollment, min and max enrollment. We want this information for the summer semester. So we are selecting, we're adding up maximum enrollment, the average enrollment, and the max of max enrollment, and the minimum of max enrollment from course section. So this is giving quite a few, group functions in one swoop here. I want to say,
Hello?
Hello?
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. So let's smack that in there and get it all lined up nice. So these are multiple single row functions. And I want to say I troubleshot this. Yeah. So you get, a single answer for all of them from course section where term ID is what, summer 2007. Yeah. If you leave it off, we get functions for all terms, which will change your result. But it's still just one line. So we can get rid of that. See what we got now, 120, 40, 50, 35. And yeah, our numbers change. So you can still have a where clause in a group, when you're working with group functions. Okay. Now, here's where we get a new clause. We have a group by clause, which is how you start to do stuff like a pivot table. Okay, so for example, we can pull up all of our capacities added together. So this is the total number of, total number of students that we could have sitting in a chair at one point in time. And of course, it inserted a space. So we're selecting sum of capacity from location, which is, just like the slide say, 433 seats in all of our locations. But sometimes we want to do summary information, right? Maybe we want to group those by something. So notice here that we're going to select building code and the sum of the capacity from the location table, and we're going to group by the building code. That's going to be an important point here in the next slide. So we're selecting building code sum and the sum of capacity summarized by building code. And we go back to Workbench. And we punch that in. And we hit Control Enter. So the building code is like, I don't know, library versus College of Business versus whatever the CR is. There are multiple buildings of building code BUS. And if you add up all their capacities, they equal 170. So let's look at that without the group function and without the group by, to just get an idea of what it looks like without it. See, we've got, 4 CR type buildings with these capacities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 type BUSs. Now capacity is 1. Those are individual offices, and you've got in the library, you've got one like that. So let me do that again, just out of grab this again, punch it in here, and we enter that, right? And it groups them. But you can also have in a where clause. Now we don't want those offices, right? So we can say where capacity is not equal to 1. So that will look at, so we got right now, we got 170, 260, and 3. So that should reduce those numbers just a little bit if I'm going off script here. So boom. Yeah. 167, 260, and 2. Drop that one office of type library off. So you can still have a where clause that will limit what gets grouped. Okay. But I wanted to go back because we're getting to this important point. And now an important point from your sponsor. If you include a field in the select clause that is not a group function, it must be in the group by clause, so that it knows what you're grouping by. So if you select building code and a group function here, see this? You're telling it, I want the sum of capacity, but you're also telling it, I want the building code, which repeats, right? So sum of capacity is one thing, and building code repeats. So that's why you've got to have building code down here in the group by, so that it knows what you're talking about when you want it to sum capacity. Is that making sense for everybody? Anybody want to, I don't know, another example of that, or?
Yeah, or maybe just repeat what you said.
Okay. We in our select statement here, we have something that will return many rows, right? If I just select building code from location, I'll get multiple rows, right? But I've also asked for something that only returns one value, the sum of capacity. If I select sum of capacity from location, I get a single value, that 433. So when you're grouping information like this, and you're using something that will return something that's not a group function that will return multiple rows, and you're using something that only returns one row, you got to have some way to tell the database which of those multiple things am I doing this summary or this group function of. Like I could say, let's see, go back here. I could do average of capacity, but I gotta have the group by to tell it which the average of capacity I'm dealing with. Let me run that. So if I don't have a group by, it'll error. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to get rid of that where clause. We don't need that. Now, looking at that in English, you're thinking in your mind, well, I want the building code and I want that building code's average capacity. But SQL isn't, smart enough to put that all together, I don't think. Should error. Oh yeah, it doesn't it's like it doesn't know, it doesn't error, it just doesn't know which one to put it against. Average capacity, um, for everything, for all building types is 33.307. But if I select a column with it, was it building code? BLD, yeah, building code. If I select a column with it, it's like it puts the last building code in the table randomly and assigns it to that
Just
average
guesses.
capacity, which is calculated against all the rows. You know what I mean? So it just doesn't know what to do with it. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, yeah, because the average capacity where building code is CR, I don't believe is 33.307. That's for everything. But let's test that. Let's select average capacity from location where building code equals CR. So this is only going to return one value, right? Because that's all we're selecting is the average capacity for all the CR buildings. Yeah, 65. So if you don't follow this rule, I think Oracle actually errors, and I think MySQL just gives you like the last one in the database just randomly, along with the thing that you grouped, you summed or you averaged or whatever. It just gives you the last value for building code, which it doesn't make any sense. They don't necessarily go together, but it did what you said. So that's just an important thing to get the right answer. You want to make sure you're doing it this way. And it kind of makes sense in English, right? I'm selecting the building code and the sum of its capacity from location, and I'm grouping that sum of capacity by building code.
Right.
Practice, would definitely make clear it up, Thomas.
Hey Don, could you show that last code one more time? I'm missing something. The
Go back to Workbench or what, Chase?
workbench, yes.
Sure. Okay, that all I wanted to show was the average capacity where the building code is CR.
Okay.
I was proving to myself that I was getting erratic results if I included building code.
Okay, yeah, I fixed it. I had a semicolon in the from. Okay, that's my bad.
Got it. All right. Okay. So that's how the group works. You just got to make sure it's in your if you're displaying it. Now this is the best way to learn something, is to try and teach it, because it makes you question everything that you think you know, and you just want to play with it all the time. I love playing with code. You guys are so lucky to be able to actually work with this stuff. My experiment here is, do I need building code in the select statement? Do I need it, or can I just select the sum of the capacity from location and group that capacity by building code without displaying the building code? So let's see if this bombs or not. It did not bomb. It returns. We have three distinct building codes, right? We got CR, BUS, and LIB. So I'm getting 3 rows back, which is what you would think. But I don't know what you would do with that, because we don't have anything to compare it to. But you don't need to have. You can group something without it being in the select statement. I just wanted to prove that to myself. Okay. So that's how that group by works. is you're summarizing or grouping together data by using this keyword group space by. Okay, note what happens. Oh, if we do have a field in the select clause, but not in the group by clause. Yeah, you can't count on the results. If we were doing what I just showed you, it shows the sum of the capacity, and then as if it and then just the building code was CR or whatever. So if we don't group by, sorry, just doing it one more time because we were doing average, I thought. Yeah, this is saying that we've got the 433 just in CR. And I'm pretty sure what that's doing is it's just grabbing the last value and sticking it in there just to make sense of it. But it's erroneous results, which, SQL will let you write stuff that, isn't quite what you wanted it to be. Okay, one final grouping. We're displaying the course ID, the day of the week, and the maximum enrollment. And we're grouping it both by course ID and day of the week. I want to say that I ran this and it worked. So you can group by more than one thing, I guess is what that, yeah, because we have course ID and CSEC day up here associated with a group function where we're summing the maximum enrollment. So we've got to group by those two things. Otherwise, it wouldn't know what to do with it. Control Enter. So our max enrollment, and notice we've got repeating groups here, but this doesn't repeat, so that it's unique between course ID and CSEC day. If we only grouped it by course ID, these would be summed. These three values where course ID is 1 would have been aggregated, but we broke it out. So that's your group by. And I think there's one other factor. Yeah. The having clause comes after the group by, and it's kind of like the where clause, only it's the stuff that you're dealing with in your group by clause. Group by this stuff having, I'll give you an example. For example, we add this having the sum of max enrollments greater than 35. We add that to the previous one, I believe, up here. Yeah, let's add this and see what we get. Which is the same group function as we're using in our select up here. See that you can modify the rows that you are grouping by using a where clause, but you modify the groupings by using a having clause. And this is starting to get advanced SQL, but it's still a basic part of the language. So we enter on that. Now we only get our larger capacity sections and days of the week. So having modifies or limits this stuff up here that it's being done by this group function, and it would be the same up there in the having clause as it is in your select clause. I'm trying to think of, so right now, what if we only wanted Monday, Wednesday, Friday? What if we only wanted the sum of the max enrollment and where CSEC day is Monday, Wednesday, Friday? We don't change. And our max enrollment is greater than 35. So we could add a where clause where CSEC day equals Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And now we should just see these three rows where it's 315, 60, and 70. So let's execute that. Woo! I love it when I go off script and it actually works. So that, you see so the having clause is where you would modify your return of this group by function, or this group function. So if we take off if we get rid of our having and go back to the original group by, now we should see, if there were any, we should see sums of max enrollment that are less than 35. Now there aren't any. There you go. That's what I get for going off script. Anyway, so that is a full on SQL statement. Select from, group by, having, where. That's getting to be a lot of them. That's getting to be the majority of the clauses in SQL. There are still others, but that's getting to be pretty close to a full function advanced query. So here we got another one with a group by. Remember, you've got a non-group function here and a grouping function here. So we've got to group by this. And then in our having, we use the same thing as we did in the same group function as we used up here. So we're selecting the building code and the sum of its capacity from the location table, grouping things by building code, but we're limiting to where the capacity is over or equal to 100. Kind of like I just did. We'll do it again. And what? Yep, 170 and 260. Is that clear as mud?
Yes.
Well, let's play Stump Don for another 10 or 15 minutes. And you guys can watch me wiggle. So you see what we're doing here, right? We're for tables that have more than one entry, like we've got more than one table or more than one row in the location table where building code equals, say, CR or LIB, right? And I added up a factor about them. And I grouped it together and I used a having clause. So let's go, and I apologize, guys. I'm drying out. Give me 15 seconds. I'll be right back. Fresh water. Okay, so let's pop over to W3 schools in the try it. Oh, here's some stuff I was doing just this morning. Oh, you're not allowed to look at that. Let's see. Select start from customers. Okay, so let's look at a table that where it repeats, and this might be a little tough in this one because it's such a simple database. And I was kind of okay. Here's some repeating stuff. We got category repeating. Category ID, remember, is a there's 8 categories, including seaweed and fish. So going back to the products table, Chaz, can you hear me okay?
Yep, well, yeah.
Look, so I've got the category table, or I'm sorry, the products table here where we have all of our Chase and Chang and Uncle Bob's organic dried pears. What aggregate information, seeing that we have a price for each product, what aggregate information question might you ask of me about this data? Thinking about grouping stuff like we've been talking about.
Maybe grouped by highest priced item.
Well, we could select the highest priced item, but that's going to be a single, right? Isn't this what isn't that going to return?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So that's your maximum price, but products. But this is good.
Maybe with the product name and the highest price by supplier or something.
By supplier or maybe category, like fish and seaweed.
Right.
Okay, so if we wanted to average the price, so we would be selecting the average price. And we got to have a hope that wasn't my wife falling down. And a category ID. So now we have get rid of that star. Now we have a non-group function and a grouping and a group function, right? So the average price per category, but I got no way to tell it group the average price for each category ID. I don't have my group by, which should be problematic. Let's run it and see if we get in. Yeah, it's just it's returning one row because I have this average price thing in here. So it's going to return one row because I have a group function in there, and it's sticking. Oh, the average price for category 1 is 28. Well, I guarantee you, it's not. The average price for everything is 28.866. So we need to group by our non-group function here. We need to tell it group my average price, group by category ID. Not group by, group by. Group by. So the average price, and now we should get a row for every category ID, and we know that there are 8. So if I'm correct, we should get 8 rows, 1 through 8, and the average price for each category ID. 1 through 8, and they happen to be in order. So let's show you, we can do order by category ID descending. So that should do them. ARG. Is it DE sending?
I think it's just DESC.
I thought it was order by category ID descending keyword.
Does order by have
We
to
need-
go under
we
group
need-
by? That's how I usually do.
Say that again, Chaz.
I usually do group by first and then the order by statement. that
Maybe. I know order's got to go. Order by I think has to come after the where clause, but we don't have a where clause. So let me see. You might be right. I'm flying without a net. Improving. Let's see. Run that. Very good. There you go. So your order by comes after your group by. All right. And we could say we got a where clause in here where is greater than 4, say. There you go. So that gets our average price for these categories. But now we probably want to join this thing, do we not? I mean, you got a category ID, but I want to know what the category is, right? So instead of category ID, what would happen if we selected the category name and joined on category ID? Wouldn't that be a more useful display?
Yes.
I think it would. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
So, like I said, I'm gonna stop talking in 8 minutes. Whether I've completely blown this, and you can work on it yourself. But at 11:30, I want you guys to take the rest of the day doing those 6 problems. And if you blast through that, I'm telling you, the exercises over here, MySQL exercises, are great. So yeah, spend the rest of the day doing those. But
Wait, which 6 exercises?
I'm sorry,
Which 6 were you talking about?
which
You mentioned 6 exercises. Are those on Canvas?
yeah, they're on Canvas. Inside of the classroom, go home to the course, and down in relational databases under SQL overview, you will see W3 Schools calculations and functions. And it's a Word document with 6 query challenges in it that use what we learned today, but they're fairly straightforward. Nothing like we're doing right now.
See, it's the new assignment, right?
It's new. It's a new assignment. Okay, so we want to, instead of displaying category ID, we want to display, I need category ID, categories. We want to display category name. And the average price for that category name from products, but we got to add categories, right? And we got to do a join now. So we'll go back to all 8 categories and we'll say where products dot, I think it's category ID and products.category ID and product ID. Yeah. Where products.category ID equals categories dot category ID group by this is where I'm stumped the chump. I'm trying to think of which one I would we'll get rid of that just so I'm not group by I think I want to group by categories. No, because price is in products. So group by products dot category ID. I'm wondering if what's going through my head is I'm going to have to display category ID and category name. I think. I may be just writing myself into a corner though. Let's try it. Hey, look at that. It worked. What are the chances of that? So yeah, so we've got our 8 categories and we joined on the name, and it went out, SQL went out and grabbed the name and was okay with that. It didn't error because there's one product name or category. There's one category name for each category ID. Anybody can tell me good job? Thomas, you'll tell me good job, won't you?
Nice job.
Good job, Doc.
Thank you.
Well done.
So you don't have to display what you're grouping by if you're doing something like this, where you're joining and getting a 1-for-1 and kind of subbing that out. Okay, 3 minutes to go. So I'm home. I'm on my phone. Shoot me a text or give me a call if you'd like help with those 6 problems in the. Let me shut this all down. Oh, and I found another tutorial and with another sample database. I gotta download that and figure out if I want to use it. If it's going to help us at all. We're almost done with SQL. I mean, we may come back for some things. There's some advanced stuff, like common table expressions and indexes and views, and there's other stuff. Like I said, you could make a career out of SQL, inner and outer joins. But yeah, make sure you find this W3 Schools calculations and functions. And if you knock that out, or if you need help, even remember that W3 Schools site that the site that you will be doing these queries on has excellent examples of how you would do stuff. And then there's always Google. You could Google how do I whatever in MySQL. That's how I've learned some of this stuff. Oh, there is one. There was one in the 2 minutes left. Oh, come Thursday we're gonna wrap up SQL, and do a review of Python of what we've achieved so far in Python, and do some practice labs back in Python. I shut it all down. Oh darn. There's a limit clause I wanted to show you guys. So let's get rid of this stuff. Am I still sharing my screen? Yes. Select building code from location. Forget about all this stuff. That's not too meaningful. Let's select building code and capacity. Wasn't that in building code? In location? Yeah. So if you might want to only get like the top 5 of something or top 10 of something. What are my top 10 whatever? I want to show you there's a clause for that. So we would say order by, capitalize that, order, put it in the right place. Select building code and capacity from location. Order by capacity. See what that does. Okay, so let's okay, so now say I want my top 5 capacities. There's a clause called limit, and you pass it a number. It's it looks kind of like a function. It might actually technically be a function, but that will limit the number that come back to now I'm going to leave you because it's now 11:31 with the and I'll email everybody with what it is that I'm doing something wrong with limit. I thought I had it right. I'm doing something wrong though. Limit. Anyway, yeah, there's a way to limit the number of rows that come back, so that if your question is what are the top 5 or 10 of something, you can do that. Okay, guys, any questions or concerns before we adjourn? If you would please turn in, even if it's blank, turn in your functions and calculations assignment, and I'll take a look at them. And if you need me, call me. Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. We'll see you guys Thursday morning.
Have a
Bye.
good day.